The conference will eventually serve as an official burial of the ANC. Because for the first time in the history of the ANC, you have so many people contesting to be a president of the ANC, and you've got a situation where the lower structures of the ANC are engaged in fiscal fights before the conference. So we're likely to see a conference that is going to collapse. We're likely to see a conference that is going to be disputed. There is no, debate on real issues. How are we going to resolve the crisis of the economy? How are we going to resolve the crisis of unemployment? And all of that. It is more about personalities.
So you don't think there isn't going to be a clear winner in terms of those personalities? Somebody's going to lead South Africa out of this morass?
No, I don't think there will be such. I think they've reached a cul-de-sac, a point of no return. Either way, there's going to be a breakaway from the ANC of prominent people who've got a serious following. The contest is so close. And the problem with the ruling party is that everywhere else it loses power, it ultimately loses the creme de la creme of their leadership. And then drunkards take over. In
a very short space of time, you've emerged to be the third largest political organization in South Africa. Do you think that's on the strength of the ideas you stand for, or due to the kind of weakness you're talking about in the ruling party?
Firstly, people are looking for an alternative home because that which used to be their home is disintegrating. I think that the EFF present a cogent alternative to the ANC, and that's why the EFF enjoys the support of our people.
There's a term being bandied about in South Africa at the moment, radical economic transformation, which has land reform and nationalization as its central pillars. That policy being advocated by the ruling party almost has echoes of the sort of economic model you are purporting or you are hoping South Africa would embrace. Explain to me what radical means when we talk about the overhaul of the economy.
Radical means the changing of patterns of ownership in the economy, because our ownership today reflects colonial and apartheid patterns of property ownership in South Africa. We need to redistribute the wealth. We must ensure that the indigenous people as well benefit from the wealth of this country. And it must be done in a manner that will not cause a disaster. It must be done in a manner that it will not disrupt the economy. We're talking expropriation of land without compensation, for instance. And we're not saying take the land from the white people and give it to black people. We're saying let the land be owned by the state. For instance, if I've got a house, even if it's mine, I must still go back to the state and say, I'm applying for the usage of this piece of land for residential purpose. The land auditor general should then verify if indeed you are using that land for the rightful purpose. Because we've got a lot of pieces of land which are idling and not being used for anything. Yet a lot of our people are landless. They need land to survive.
I've not heard many people dispute the need for redistribution more equitably. The discussion is often about the approach. And there's a fear that that kind of approach would be counterintuitive. It actually wouldn't do the things that you're saying it would do. It would make investors pretty nervous. They'd pull out of the economy. If you give people land without giving them the full financial support to utilize that land, it will lie fallow. And you've already seen examples of that.
But the British did it after the World War II. They faced a catastrophe. They had to take the strategic assets, be owned by the state. When they were fully established and running, then they let go into the private sector. We are from a catastrophe ourselves called apartheid. The banks collapsed in America and led to the world recession. They were in the hands of the private sector. So it is incorrect to say anything state-owned is inherently incompetent and will lead into a disaster.
There was a time when you were a proponent of the kind of state-led interventions that we saw in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela. Those two economies are literally on the brink of bankruptcy at the moment. Are you still a proponent of that kind of intervention, or are you more moderate, looking at perhaps what the Chinese have done?
Let's look at Zimbabwe. The problem in Zimbabwe is not what they're doing. Because in Zimbabwe, there is no nationalization. It's indigenization. They want the indigenous people to own the economy, even if they are a private sector. So to compare that which we are asking for with what the Zimbabweans are doing is completely different. So Zimbabweans are not failed by what they are trying to do. They are failed by a person who has held power for far too long. Venezuela is failed by the oligarchy that lost out of the nationalization of the oil asset and went to mobilize the international role players to sabotage the real stuff. The people of Venezuela, they are happy. They like that the government is actually investing in their health services, in their education and all that.
I don't want to get bogged down in the Venezuelan example, but when you look at visuals of Venezuela today, people crossing the border just to be able to go and buy bread in a neighboring country or medicine for the sick, that's not a picture of happiness.
But that's what capital does to you. When you fight them, when you want to prove that there is an alternative system to capitalism, they sabotage you.
Let's assume things truly fall apart for the ruling party, 2019 elections, and you make it into office. What would the EFF be offering South Africa?
We'll give our people land to use and make sure that the land becomes productive to feed themselves and feed the world. And that land will be accompanied by the necessary tools to work the land. It will be accompanied by financial skills. The second thing we'll do will be to share the ownership of the banks and the mining sector and any other thing that is strategic in the economy so that we redistribute the wealth. The fourth thing we'll do will be to put more money in education.
You think you're going to be president of this country?
Well, I think I can be the president of South Africa. Anyone else can be the president of South Africa. Because presidents are just individuals who go around cutting ribbons. You ought to surrender yourself with the best team. You must never associate with people who are of a lesser understanding to you. You see, I'm not a PhD student or graduate. My spokesperson is a PhD, a graduate. So you need that. But any fool can be a president. We've got a stupid president now. There's a most stupid president in America now. So any fool can be a president.